Hello and welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Stephen Ryan.
And I am Matthew Lucas, and we do post once a week every Friday, so do hit subscribe and the notification bell if you want to hear of our continuing adventures.
Exactly. And this week we're going overseas, so we're off to Chile.
Now, this story is so exciting. We have been filming Chilean plants for the last year. Give us the overview, Stephen.
All right, well, we're going to have a look at a range of plants from bulbs to trees that all come from that amazing wonderland that's called Chile. And I grow a whole range of things from that part of the world and love them. So this is an exciting day.
And we've got 7 amazing different plants. So we should, without any further ado, turn our attention to the ones in your hand and see what is number 1. Stephen, so I'm presuming we're going to start with this fabulous thing behind me.
Funnily enough, not. Yes, behind us is Tropaeolum tricolor, one of the South American nasturtiums, which we have spoken about in some of our other videos. Yeah. So it is covered there, and we'll put some links below.
Is it exclusively Chilean?
Yes, it is definitely Chilean. So there you go. It's one of the hundreds, if not thousands, of endemic species that come from Chile.
Which is a very, before we get to the things in your hand, which no one has seen yet, but this is a good segue. Why is Chile such a floral hotspot, as opposed to Argentina, right next to it?
Well, the Andes have a lot to do with it. Chile's a very long, narrow country, and the weather patterns tend to come from the west towards Chile. So most of the rain, most of the weather patterns stop at Chile. Once they get to the other side of the Andes, they've dropped all their rain there, and so Argentina becomes much drier. It's a bigger landmass, so it also gets other sorts of weather things that come into play. But it's a much poorer country florally, because Chile has that sort of stop of the Andes, and of course that amazing sort of from sea level right up to high altitudes in a comparatively small space, and then of course the country itself goes all the way down. I mean, it's an enormously long country, and so it goes from complete arid desert at the very top down to sub-Antarctic floras in the south. So it's an enormously interesting place.
So is it a hotspot, or is it just the geography of the country is such that, by accident there are so many varied floral plants there? To
be honest with you, I'm not quite sure how they define these hotspots. Certainly we've got several around the world that are in fact defined.
What are the other ones?
Well, 2 of the major ones, actually, funnily enough, are quite different sorts of habitats from Chile. One of them is the Western Australian, sort of southwest part of Western Australia. They've got an amazing array, particularly of ephemeral plants that grow there. And the other one, of course, is Southern Africa, where there is a hugely diverse floral thing going on there, particularly there with geophytes, the bulbs and things that die down when the hot weather comes on in the summer. So those areas are definitely floral hotspots. Chile, I think, fits in there, although it's more about its climatic variation, I think, than some of the other places.
Okay. Interesting to know. Well, I think without further ado, you should reveal what's in your hands. Ta-da!
Now we need to go in and have a close look.
Tell us the story. What are the names of these? I'll hold them.
All right, you can hold them. You can be in charge.
You can hold that one. Actually.
Oh, all right. This is Tecophilaea cyanocrocus, the rare blue Chilean crocus. Now, it isn't a crocus. It's a Tecophilaea.
But it is blue. And isn't blue the holy grail for some reason?
Oh, it is. Now, that's the wild form that is the sort of type specimen. So that's the rich blue one. The one I've got here is Tecophilaea cyanocrocus violacea. So it's the purple version.
And you can see the difference. This is Elizabeth Taylor. This is blue.
Yeah, well, exactly. Now, the Tecophilaea is a fascinating bulb. It's a great collector's plant because it's got a lot of things going on around it that are peripheral, sort of. It's named after one of the few women who've had a plant named after them.
Is it, I would have thought that's... Oh, so I would have thought to start with Tecophilaea. It sounds very Latin botanical.
Well, her name was Tecophila.
Really?
Yes. She was a botanic artist, and her father was a botanist, and she used to illustrate quite a lot of his works. He was born in about 1766, died in about 18 something or another, sort of 1830-ish.
So early in the piece?
Yes, quite early in the piece. He apparently discovered Tecophilaea.
In Chile?
In Chile, yes, obviously. You've got to go there to find it. And named the genus after his daughter. So it's one of the few plant genera that's been named after a woman. There are others, but they're nearly always about old guys, really. And so Tecophilaea was named after ones. Now, the other thing about Tecophilaea that's really interesting is that it was so desirable that it was over-collected, really badly over-collected. And until comparatively recent times, it would be listed as thought to be extinct in the wild. But the issue was that they just hadn't explored enough areas. So they cleaned out the areas, in fact, where they found it first. So it was extinct in those areas. But in more recent decades, they have found wild stands of Tecophilaea again. So it is out there.
And what is the landscape that it's growing in?
It grows in sort of open, rocky, scrubby areas in sort of hills sort of areas in the lower parts of the Andes. It has a dry summer dormancy.
So yes, let's talk about the care. So dry summer, which is not dissimilar to many spring bulbs.
Exactly, but it likes a cool dry summer dormancy. It doesn't like to get hot and dry. So,
so that's tricky.
Keep your bulbs cool.
In Australia.
The thing is to grow them in a pot so that when they're dormant, you can take your pots and you can put them somewhere in a shady corner.
So that's what you do.
Yeah, and then I bring them out when they're growing in the winter. So they grow through the winter months. They flower in the late winter, early spring. So you have them out in the sun so that it will open the flowers. We're fortunate today that it's a lovely sunny day, so they've opened up nicely.
Makes a nice change.
Now there's three basic forms of Tecophilaea. You've got the straight blue one, you've got the violet one, and there's also one which we've got some images of that is much, much whiter in the centre and a slightly paler shade of blue, and that's known as Tecophilaea cyanocrocus leclentii. But of course they all vary slightly because they can be seedling raised, and so you can get sort of variants that sort of link in between the three main forms.
Okay, so back to growing. So A, they can grow well in pots. B, you could plant them if you were in a climate that was similar to where they come from, which is having cool summers.
Cool, dry summers. So
that's odd, isn't it?
It's a little bit difficult. I also think that they're very much under threat in the garden anyway, because they're absolutely delicious to slugs and snails. So I don't think Tecophilaea is a great garden plant for most people. Somebody will get in touch with us, obviously, who's got a drift of it growing in their garden somewhere in the world, maybe the foothills of the Andes, I don't know. But it is one of the holy grail plants, and I'm not quite sure what they're charging for it in England at the moment, but I certainly know...
I happen to see your price tag, Stephen.
Don't look. It's actually cheap. They were...
You don't have to justify.
I was charging $40 a bulb for them up until about 7 or 8 years ago when I started to get more bulk happening.
So let's talk about that, because this one has got 3 growth points. So are they slow to multiply?
If you grow them reasonably well, they'll sort of double every year.
Oh, okay.
So this little purple one I've got has got 1 main bulb and it's got 3 baby bulbs around it. And these were both potted up last year, so they're in the same pot from the previous year, so they haven't been redone this year. So you get extra value. But I know at one stage in England they were charging £40 each for Tecophilaea bulbs. And certainly now that it's been rediscovered in the wild, some of the mystique has possibly gone off because it's no longer thought to be extinct.
I must say though that you were the first person I ever saw having them before I knew you. And I think in Australia there are very few places to get them.
There's a handful of growers. I do them a bit. There's a grower over in the Dandenongs, Tonkins bulbs, that you can probably get Tecophilaeas from, but most of them are being shared around amongst private collectors to a large extent.
Well, our first, well actually it's kind of our second Chilean plant is extraordinary. So I think what we're going to do now is step back in time to summer. Was it
summer? Yes.
And look at?
We're going to look at a really interesting Chilean large shrub or small tree.
Off we go. Yet another Chilean summer flower, Stephen. What is this?
This is a fabulous large shrub / small tree that comes from central and southern Chile called Crinodendron patagua.
Crinodendron patagua sounds like a bad emperor.
Yes, it does. Well, Crinodendron actually means lily tree. So hence crinum is a lily. So Crinodendron patagua, it's an evergreen. It will tolerate mild frosts. It can grow up to 4 or 5 meters tall or more. I've actually seen it taller than that in the wild.
So that is a small tree.
Yeah, that is a small tree.
I'll refer back to our definition of what is a large shrub and what is a small tree.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway. And it gets these beautiful little white Tiffany lampshade type flowers that it produces for months over the summer.
Does it?
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, it's not flashy, but it's really beautiful,
yeah,
isn't it?
It's one of those plants that people will often walk past and then something will catch their eye and they'll come back and have another look and they'll go, oh my God, that is really pretty.
It really is.
So it's a lovely plant.
I'm just noticing that the ants are loving the nectar.
Yes, well, ants can be a good pollinator too, so there you go.
Interesting. What a fabulous tree.
Yeah, so there we go.
That is such a beautiful tree.
It is beautiful. I'm very fond of the Crinodendron and it gives me fabulous summer flowers, so why not indeed?
It's beautiful, and it's interesting how some things become popular in cultivation and some things doesn't. Like I'm thinking of the monkey puzzle tree, famous Chilean native, which very common in Europe and North America.
It was de rigueur to have a monkey puzzle tree in your garden, even if it was a tiny little plot.
And you were saying that really the popularity of plants was based upon their hardiness for the North American and European markets.
Yeah, and in fact most of their collecting was done to try and find plants that would in fact be able to be used as garden plants in particularly in England.
So hence lots of Chinese plants.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Chile has its plants that are quite hardy, but a lot of them come from summer rainfall areas, so that makes it a little bit more complicated. They come from areas where they get lots of rain because of the Andes. And so there's a handful of things that sort of have become stock in trade sort of plants in Europe and North America. But there's oodles of fantastic stuff out there that probably would grow quite well for us in the right aspects. But of course we get most of our plants not direct from South America. They've come to us via North America and Europe, so we tend to get the plants that they were passionate about and not the ones we should be getting.
Oh goodness me, the politics of horticulture. But I am thinking our next stop might be just over there. What is that fabulous tree that we filmed a few weeks ago?
All right, so it's a very famous tree because of its connections, and we go into the history later, but it's a beautiful South American tree that's late winter, early spring flowering, so it's a different season, and it has quite a lot of interesting history to it.
Let's go. Continuing on our The Fabulous Plants of Chile route, what is this glorious tree?
This is a fabulous tree from Chile called Drimys winteri.
It's winteri. It's flowering in winter.
No, it's got nothing to do with winter. It's named after Captain Winter, who was a famous explorer along the coast of Chile, and he used this plant, the bark of, to cure scurvy. I think an orange would do the job far better, but there you go. So it was used as a cure for scurvy. It's known commonly as winter's bark because he used the bark and it was Captain Winter. So yes, it all connects. It grows up to around about 5-6 metres. So it's a moderately large evergreen tree, and you'll see it through the forests of southern Chile, and it stands out superbly when it's in flower.
All right, so here it is in Mount Macedon, which is not subtropical.
No.
It's not a subtropical tree?
No. You wouldn't take it to the tropics or subtropics. It grows in the damp, cool forests of southern Chile, but it doesn't get a lot of excessive cold either. So if you're growing this in England, you'd probably grow it in Cornwall quite well, against a sheltered wall perhaps in other parts. And it's certainly quite a popular plant in Europe. I don't know whether it's grown much in North America, but there's no reason why it couldn't be.
It's a beautiful tree. Is it evergreen?
Yes, it's solidly evergreen. It's a very primitive plant. Its flower structure is such that it's one of the earlier flowering plants, so it's closely sort of linked with the magnolia type.
Magnolias.
So it's not the same family as magnolia, but it's one of those very early primitive flowering plants.
Not an ounce of scent.
And yet you will find, if you go into the books, they all talk about a perfume. Now, no, I can't smell it either.
There is not even a hint.
Yeah. Now, all the books say that it's scented. Is that just the fact that somebody once said it was and everybody's just continued on with that same story?
Well, we are here to right that wrong. This does not have a fragrance.
But it could just be my plant. So who knows? All right, so if you're going to grow Drimys, it will cope with quite a lot of direct sunlight. Mine, in fact, is, but its roots aren't. And the trick is to make sure that it has a cool, moist root run. So mine's actually between a shade house and my potting shed, and so its roots never see the sun. It gets moisture from the sprinklers that go on in the shade house, so it gets ample moisture because it grows in sort of drippy, damp forests in the wild. But it's an emergent, so it comes up out of the scrub around, so it does get up into the light in its native habitat.
Interesting. Well, more kudos Chile, more amazing plants. Well, I can't wait to see what else we're going to look at.
We'll have some other great ones.
And that tree is still doing its fabulous thing.
Oh yes, it flowers for probably 2.5 to 3 months, so I get good value out of it.
All right, well, I think our next visit, and this bulb knocked my socks off.
Yes.
Not this one, but it's from the same family, isn't
Yes, that's right. So it's in the same family as the Tecophilaea, so we're going to have a look at one of its relatives.
Let's go. Continuing our Chilean epic, Stephen, this is the prettiest thing I've ever seen. Tell me all.
All right. Well, it's a little bulb from Chile,
Yep.
in the same family as the Chilean crocus, the Tecophilaea, and it's a little thing called Conanthera trimaculata.
Trimaculata.
Yeah, tri is 3, maculata is spots.
Oh, it's got 3 spots.
Yeah, so
Stephen.
there you go.
My
So
goodness.
trimaculata. There's another species that doesn't have the spots on the flower, but otherwise is basically similar. As far as I know, I think it's a genus of just 2 species. Yeah, so it's a very pretty little bulb. It likes a cool, dry summer dormancy. So I would keep it in pots during the summer months, but have it somewhere shaded, and a reasonable amount of light when it's up and growing. But its foliage, a bit like some of the alliums, the onions, its foliage tends to go off and die down before the flowers are finished. So it's already basically dormant whilst it's still in flower.
It is so pretty. And what kind of environment does it grow in Chile? Is it exposed? Is it a rocky grower?
Look, to be honest with you, I've never seen it in the wild, but from what I can work out, it would seem it grows amongst small herby type plants in sort of slightly higher reaches of the Andes. So it's not a high alpine, but it grows up in the hill type country. And I think that the small herbs and things that it would probably grow amongst would actually hold it up rather better than it does in a pot, because it tends to sort of flop over a bit when it's in flower.
Yeah.
But very pretty little plant, flowers in high summer. So, you know, most bulbs tend to be spring or autumn oriented as far as their flowering is concerned. So it takes our little bulbous friends into another season.
Our little bulbous friends. It is so beautiful. Chile has amazing flowers.
Oh yes, it's a very well worthwhile a trip to the Andes, I have to say.
There we go.
Yeah, so there you go, Conanthera trimaculata.
Oh, Stephen, I don't think I can leave until I bought one of those. It's stunning.
It's a gorgeous flower, and in fact this tiny little group of bulbs are so precious and gorgeous.
They really are.
Yeah.
What is next in our Chilean Odyssey?
Well, we're going back to a climbing plant that I think is a real aristocrat in the gardening fraternity.
And we've made a video about unusual climbing plants, and this wasn't one of them, because
No.
we were saving it. This is a fabulous Chilean plant, and it is
Berberidopsis corallina.
Let's have a look. Stephen, continuing on our rare Chilean plant quest, of which you have a number of specimens, what is this?
Yes, well, this is a fairly, well, I'd say actually very rare climbing plant from Chile.
Yeah.
You don't see it in cultivation very often. It has some issues with regards to growing it.
Don't we all?
Yes, it's one of those climbers that comes from damp, cool forests in central Chile. It requires similar conditions, so it likes shade, it likes moisture, it can be just a bit fussy. It needs an acidic sort of leaf mouldy soil, and if it has all those things and never dries right out and, you know, doesn't get 45 degrees in a howling northwesterly, then it is just growable. It's a very light climber.
Wow.
So it could make a nice pot plant that you could grow perhaps on a tripod or something like that.
Yeah.
If you had just a small area between windows or next to a door or something where you wanted something to grow up that wasn't going to entangle you as you go past, then this particular climber could do it. And it goes under the wheelbarrow name of Berberidopsis corallina.
Berberidopsis corallina. Is corallina referring to the colour of the flowers?
Corallina is referring to the fact that the flowers are almost coral-like.
Oh, I see.
So they're thick textured waxy bells. They're small, but it can produce them in quite large numbers. And I think Berberidopsis actually comes from the fact that the flower shape, if you are a devotee of the Berberis family,
Aren't similar?
yeah, quite similar in shape. So hence Berberidopsis, like a Berberis. So there you go.
I would also just add the leaves are actually quite sharp. It's a little bit hollyish.
Yeah, but not really bitey. As per se, you know. Well, with your tender little hands, I can imagine.
I'm feeling the pinch,
Yeah,
Stephen.
so it's a very, very pretty small evergreen climber, but it's a bit of an aristocrat. It needs a lot of care and attention to grow it well. And it's a really weird genus as well, because there are only 2 species in the genus. And there are only 2 genera in the family. So
that talk always confuses me, but we'll just elide over that.
Yes, exactly. So it comes from the family Berberidopsaceae. No, Berberidopsidaceae. There are 2 species in this genus, and one of them, the one we've just been speaking of, comes from Chile, so South American. And the other one, I just happen to have one I prepared earlier.
Let's get that in place.
There we go.
Wow.
This one is the other species, and this one is, believe it or not, Australian. So the other species in the genus comes from Australia.
Isn't that extraordinary that 2 things that are so closely related are so far away from each other?
Continental drift, probably.
Well, exactly, but you'd also would have assumed that there would have been then more variation in each area, that it would have sort of splintered into various species.
But it hasn't really speciated everywhere. So
is that the word?
Yeah, speciated, yes. There we go. So this one is Berberidopsis beckleri. So this one comes from the forests of northern New South Wales and southern Queensland.
And is it similar climatically? So it's cold and damp but not freezing?
No, they get virtually no frost in its natural habitat. It will cope with very, very light frosts though. I found it copes with ours here quite well, but it likes similar conditions. It likes damp, foresty sort of soils, semi-shade, no direct sunlight to speak of. And again, it's a light twiner that could quite easily be pot grown.
Right.
And you rarely see this even in its home country of Australia.
Strange, because it's so pretty, and given its sort of delicacy, I guess, then it actually would make a great pot plant indoors as well as...
Very possibly. I haven't thought about using it as actually an indoor plant, but certainly in a fernery or a shade house. You could grow it lightly up a post in the middle of a fernery, something like that. And yes, if you go to the average Australian native plant nursery in this country, they'll say, what are you talking about?
I think the average Australian plant nursery in Australia is, let's just say, but at lowest common denominator.
Yeah, well, they grow lots of grevilleas, lots of bottle brushes, quite a lot of acacias, but some of this stuff goes to the keeper.
Well, it's stunning. It really is beautiful. Well, once again, Chile has done us proud.
I think so.
But wait, there's more. What do I see above you but that beautiful bellflower? Now that is it not? That's the Chilean bellflower, and then the Latin name is?
Lapageria rosea, and named after Josephine, as in Napoleon's girlfriend. I think it was a sycophantic botanist who was trying to get in with the royals.
Are you sycophants?
Yeah, yes, well, some of us might be. And it's known, of course, in Chile as capiwi. And there's a white one flowering above us that I've had in the garden here for many, many years, and it's looking gorgeous.
But you were also, so we've actually made a video about that, which we'll link below, so we won't go into too much detail about it. But just to say, because when we made the video about it in the past, one of the points you did make was that if you want something that's covered in blooms, this is not the creeper for you. And yet this year it is literally dripping in flowers. Why do you think that is?
We've had a La Nina, so we've had a coolish summer.
It's Spanish, and it's reacting to its Spanish roots.
Chilean
rather than Spanish, but anyway, it's the language. But it is enjoying a fantastic season. We'll show you some images of it. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, so there we go, an aside that was connected. That's called a segue.
It is. Well, let's wait for the next segue for the next fabulous Chilean plant. Now, here's the truth. After we made that film, I did buy one and planted it, and then not long afterwards I said, Stephen, it's not doing anything, Stephen. Well, it's now spring, Stephen, and it is shooting away and is looking fabulous.
Oh, fantastic. I'm glad your Berberidopsis is all alive.
I asked my money back.
Yeah, all right, good. I'm pleased about that.
But then in that film, we did mention the native, well, it's not the native, it's the national flower of Chile.
Yes, and that's Lapageria rosea, the national flower of Chile. It is just the most exquisite climber, and it is a true aristocrat. I mean, it was named after an aristocrat, and it can be quite a difficult plant to make really happy.
Yeah, and we made a video about why and how you can alleviate that, so we will link that below.
Yes.
Okay, on to the next. What's the next epic pit stop?
All right, well, we're going to now look at a smaller plant. I guess you'd call it a perennial. It's certainly not a shrub, and it's something in the bromeliad family. Ooh. So there you go, which of course the whole of South America is full of bromeliads.
Let's have a look.
Yes, we had to get down low because this plant is in flower near ground level. So
it is extraordinary. This is by your drive, and it's so eye-catching. The colours. Yeah, tell us everything.
All right, for a start, we already know it comes from Chile.
Yeah.
This one, I would assume, is Fascicularia bicolor, subspecies bicolor. The name translates as bundles, so the flowers are in bundles.
Yep.
So I assume that's how it works. Bicolor, of course, means two-coloured. That's reasonably simple.
Yep.
And The flowers are actually these beautiful blue bits right in the middle in this bundle. And what this plant does is when it flowers, its leaves turn bright red to attract pollinators to the blue flowers. So it becomes more florally interesting because the leaves change colour.
Is the pollinator going to respond to the red, do you think?
Yes, because this could well be a hummingbird pollinated plant, and birds see red really well. So there's a good chance that the birds are lured in by the red leaves, but then because it's in the centre, they get attracted to the centre of the plant, and then they find the nectar source that they want inside. We've talked about the name of the plant, but what you need to know is that it's actually a bromeliad, so it's in the same family as the commercial pineapple.
Really?
Yes, that's a bromeliad as well.
Is it?
Yes, oh, there's your little brain ticking over now, I can tell. And it is also probably the most cold hardy of all of the bromeliads. This one, you can see it growing in gardens in the south of England. You can see it growing in gardens in colder parts of North America. I'm sure you could grow it in the garden in Portland, Oregon. So it's one of those plants that people love to grow in the cooler climates where they're in zonal denial, so that they have this sort of tropical-esque look.
Zonal denial?
Yeah, zonal denial.
So just on that point then, what is its hardiness range, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure about zone-wise, but it will certainly cope with quite a few degrees of frost. And it's also comparatively drought and heat tolerant. So it doesn't seem to like full sun. It seems to grow and flourish better where it's got plenty of light but not much direct sunlight. Having said that, I've seen it growing out in the sun too, so it's a very adaptable plant. But anyhow, it's happy enough, it's grown well. I ignore it all the time. I don't do anything to it. I don't water it, I don't feed it, I don't prune it, I don't do anything to it at all. And I propagate it just by breaking away young crowns, plonking them in the ground
and selling them ruthlessly.
Yeah, well, hopefully in fact, selling them ruthlessly.
That is the most stunning thing, and it's just like a red beacon. It's extraordinary.
Yeah, quite a remarkable plant. So there you go.
And we did make a film really exclusively about that, which we will link below, which gives more information about care information. And we also made a collaborative video with the wonderful Rachel at Gardening Induenza, and you were suggesting for her that it could be something she could try in Ireland.
Yes, exactly.
Out in the garden, not in a pot.
Yep. I see no reason why it wouldn't grow.
There you go. Well, is that it?
Well, it's it for this video, but I have to say we have hardly scratched the surface of Chilean plants. I mean, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands more that we could engage with, and there may even have to be a part 2.
Because everything I ever seem to ask you in your nursery when it's in bloom or something curious is happening, I will say, Stephen, where's this from? Chile. So there's even more things in your nursery.
Oh yes. So I think this will be the beginning of an odyssey.
Relationship.
Yeah, so we will revisit Chile on another occasion and look at a whole palette of other plants.
Well, I can't wait. Well, from Tecophilaea.
Yes, from Tecophilaea.
The 19th century botanist, illustrator, botanic illustrator.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed our Chilean odyssey. It was great to make, wasn't it?
It was good fun because we were engaging with a whole pile of really quirky and interesting plants.
Throughout 12 months. So we look forward to you joining us on our next continuing adventure, whatever it might be.
Yes, probably somewhere else in the world, maybe in Victoria, Australia, who knows.
So do hit subscribe. We post every Friday if you want to know what we'll be talking about next week. And until then, we look forward to seeing you.
Goodbye all.